Please rise for His Worship, Mayor Fougere.
Good evening, everybody. We'll begin the meeting with a prayer. We beseech the Lord to bestow wisdom upon the members of this council in order that their decisions may be founded on justice and prudence. Amen. So before we get to the agenda, I just want to raise one small point of recognition. It's always nice to recognize a person who has received an honor and award. And I've talked to Councillor Young about this. I'll keep this very short, but I just wanted to let those in the audience, those around council, and those watching television that Councillor Young has received the Order of Merit. It was done late last November. And just quickly that she has been awarded the Merit of Honor due to her innovation in the field of education and for an advocate to the arts and mentor for women in leadership. So on behalf of the citizens of Regina and this council, Councillor Young, just wanted to say congratulations to you. We have a motion to begin the agendas for this evening.
Thank you. I'll move the agenda with the adjustments from the clerk.
Thank you. A seconder for that? Councillor Murray?
Your Worship, I'll second those. That's moving one of the agenda items. It's a public notice item from the related reports onto the agenda. And the second part is the two ratifying the collective agreements, and that's CR 12-188 as well as CR 12-189, the out of scope. And then we're going to remove a bylaw 2012-101 as there's some edits that are required. So I second those.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes, or sorry, the minutes for the last meeting, sorry. Motion for that.
I'll move those minutes, Your Worship.
Seconder?
Second it.
Councillor Hinks. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public notice bylaws and related reports, CR 12-181. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. For those present this evening, Council is going to consider a report in relation to portions of the northwest and northeast quarter section of 8 and 9 in the Township 18, Range 19 west of the 2nd Meridian. This is a report that required public notice, and notice has been given. So if there's anyone present this evening that would like to address Council on this report, please indicate your desire at this time. I see no one, Your Worship, and I can also advise there are no letters of objection.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is from the Finance Administration Committee. The Chair of that committee would like to move this report.
Your Worship, that I will. I'll happily move CR 12181.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we move to delegations. D12-114, Chad Novak. Good evening, Mr. Novak. I know you know the protocol. Please state your name, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions of council afterwards.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Fougere, City Councillors, and City Administration. Thank you for letting me speak to you tonight about the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. My name is Chad Novak, and I'm here to speak as a taxpayer of the City of Regina. Initially, my intent was to come in and commend City Hall for all the hard work that has been done towards the wastewater treatment facility, as I had thought there had been some significant work done up to date. However, after reviewing some of the information that was presented to you last week and what appeared in the media last week, there are some serious concerns that I have in regards to what has been done so far and what the plans are for the future. And the more I look for answers, the more questions seem to arise. First of all, I should speak to the fact that the update this week brought up a quote-unquote surprising revelation that the costs have gone up significantly since 2008, when the planning originally started to upgrade the facility to meet increasing environmental standards. It was mentioned that in the planning stages, our city administration neglected to factor in inflation into their cost estimates for this project. Now, this honestly scares me. Why? Because we, the taxpayers, are putting our trust into our elected officials to represent us and our city administration to do their due diligence on these kind of massive construction projects that require significant taxpayer investment. We elect our city council in the hopes that they have the ability to represent us and ask the hard questions of city administration when they need to be asked. I guess another question that comes up out of that is, what was the original expectation for the project completion? Is it possible that the inflation wouldn't have really made a significant impact had the project stuck to the original timeline? The report also states that a lot of preliminary work has been done in 2011 and 2012. This leaves a question of as to what was being done since 2008 and why the long delay in getting the project started. Now let's consider the fact that we overlooked a very serious yet basic issue like inflation, where the cost of this project went from $120 million in 2008 to $150 million to $207 million and beyond by 2015. During my research, I found that we already increased our debt level in 2008 to finance the original estimated $120 million construction cost. So how are we expecting to make up the extra $87 million plus? Is this going to affect other major projects that we are currently considering and future projects? I'm hoping there is no talk about raising utility rates even higher. I'll make one quick mention that I didn't see in a report that there is talk about that, because as I will touch on in a minute, we are already paying some of the highest utility rates in Western Canada. I am not sure if this has been talked about yet, but considering the fact that we recently entered into a contract to actually sell off our wastewater to a mining operation for $80 million, I'm hoping that this money will be used to directly offset any extra costs for this project. The report notes that the report notes that we will require at least $150 million in debt financing to go ahead with this project, which I should note is $50 million more than expected in 2008. It also states that the inflation is based on current markets. An obvious concern is what happens if the inflation goes even higher and the debt required is higher than our current debt ceiling. Assuming we still need to spend the $207 million plus on the wastewater treatment plant, which of our capital projects are going to take priority? We currently have an expectation to finance the RRI, a new library, and an expanded police station, just name a few. The economic bubble can burst, and I feel as a responsible city council and administration, you should be preparing us for the worst and hoping for the best. It should also be noted that the report cautions that the allocation of city debt to this project will constrain the city's ability to borrow for other major capital projects based on current borrowing limits and where existing debt is currently committed. As a result, it states that the city's debt will need to be closely and strategically managed in the coming years. This statement should raise red flags when considering spending on want items like the RRI, and we should focus more on need items like this project or other essential infrastructure upgrades. For example, we keep hearing that there is significant infrastructure deficit in our city. What is the total cost to correct that deficit, and what is our plan to address it? Speaking about how Regina's utility rates are one of the highest in Western Canada, did you know that Regina residents pay 56% higher average monthly water bills than Saskatoon? In fact, when comparing all major cities in the Prairie provinces, we are actually the second highest, topped only by Winnipeg by $1.05 per month. Now, I'm hoping that the steady 9% increases that the Regina residents have incurred over the last few years, and going forward as well, will be put to good use. However, considering that we are already that much higher than our provincial counterpart, and we are the only city in Saskatchewan taking on such a massive, costly project, it is hard for me to believe that we are getting the best bang for our buck. In this report, and back in 2008 as well, it continues to state that these upgrades are required in order to meet increasing provincial and federal regulations and standards for wastewater treatment plants. In 2008, it stated how the tighter provincial regulations were coming into effect in 2011 and 2012. And now, in this update, it is now saying 2016. Now, I have done a lot of research over the past few days, and I can't find a single document showing that there's any tighter provincial regulations coming up at all. And the last update to provincial water regulations was actually 2007. As well, if these new regulations were coming into effect soon, I would reasonably expect other cities in Saskatchewan to be as concerned as Regina, as they should all be planning for the same regulations. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. I researched Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, Prince Albert, Swift Current, and Yorkton. None of them seem to be spending on upgrades anywhere near our estimated $200 million plus. In fact, I have found that there have been brand new facilities built for far less in recent years. Albeit they are smaller communities, but it just makes it that much tougher for me to comprehend how simple upgrades can cost so much for us compared to a brand new facility. In researching the provincial and federal regulations, I've found that we are currently meeting both provincial and federal regulations, or at least from the reports that I have found. And the federal government even stated that 75% of Canadian cities already meet or exceed their expectations, which is typically achieved by having a secondary treatment system, which we already have in place. Also in the report, it states how a significant portion of the current plant can and would be retrofitted to meet those standards. But there are things that simply cannot be used, and we need to therefore replace and or add to them. It states that the retrofit upgrades would be around the $30 million mark to quote-unquote bring it up to original. In regards to the recent funding and or upgrades, I noticed that in March of 2007, we received $3.3 million from the federal government towards a $12 million upgrade. And in 2012, we did $19.6 million upgrades to the facility. Now, were these done? And if so, were they part of these retrofit upgrades, or were they a completely separate project? Finally, the report states that we are upgrading the facility to be capable of handling 258,000 people by 2035, which, through my research, I see that we have used as a benchmark for our official community plan. This is a growth rate of 3,000 people per year. While I commend the city for thinking big, I have to wonder, is this realistic? Are we building something that we may not require for far, far longer? Considering the fact that this recent population boom is certainly not the norm for Saskatchewan or Regina over the past 20 to 30 years, realistically, we should be looking at our past as well to see what a realistic projection of our population would be in 22 years. For us to grow by 65,000 people, based on the 2011 census showing that the city of Regina had 193,000 people, seems to be far-reaching at best. Also, consider that we have only increased our population by an average of 540 per year in between 1991 and 2009, and actually decreased by 625 per year between 1996 and 2002. Now, factoring these more realistic numbers in, we should barely be breaking the 200,000 population mark by 2035. I will now answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Are there any questions of the delegation? Mr. Fraser, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the delegation, I'd just like to say thanks for your report. It actually brought up a few good questions that I'd like to ask for administration. But not right now, I think during the next report. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Only questions to the delegation now.
Okay. So again, thanks for your report. The things that this is, the questions this has raised for me is just regarding the provincial regulation, what our obligations really are, around the $80 million from the potash deal for recycled wastewater, and also about how the reuse of the existing equipment.
Mr. Fraser, Councillor Fraser, you have to ask a question, directly to a question. Okay,
sure, this is coming to a question.
If you don't mind.
Well, do you have anything else to add other than those questions then, I guess?
Well, I guess a few things that I want to make sure that we address here, that considering also that we're in a financial situation where we're working on addressing the pension shortfall, $293 million. We still haven't got that figured out. There's talk about, I don't know where I've seen this recently, but there was talk about solvency protection and exemption and how it is unlikely. But the reality is, as I've identified in the past, it is very likely that given the quote-unquote perfect storm, that all of these funding requirements could come to head at the same time, and we wouldn't be able to magically increase our debt limit any further. I don't think increasing our debt just because other centres are is the responsible way to do it. That's pretty much all I can say right now. One other thing about the population, I found through some other research in the past, I recall this, was in 2001, they forecasted the population in Regina to go up to over 220,000 by 2012. Well, here we are in 2012, and, hindsight is 2020. We're not even at 200,000 yet. So just another kind of aspect to consider. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Novak. No other questions. You can return to the gallery, and
Thank
we'll
you.
consider the report CR 12-167, and this is a wastewater treatment plant upgrade project update. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you and I discussed prior to, I'm going to do a little editorial before I speak each time. As Council is aware, I was in the chair at the Executive Committee, so I want to make sure that our new members understand why I'm standing, what the report is, and the procedures that go on. This, we'll call it a learning opportunity for all of us. And and we can probably even handle questions to the clerk later on or to you. So the first one is, there is a number here, and it's called CR 12-167, which identifies the report. The title of the report is Wastewater Treatment Plant Upgrades and Project Update. Now, normally what I would do as the person who is in the chair of executive committee is bring forward the motion. In this case, it's a receive and file. And the discussion that occurred so that everybody understands the view. It is my job to make sure that the discussion and the recommendations that occurred at committee are brought forward to here. So it is my job to summarize. Now, there's always exceptions to this. So in this case, the mayor has actually asked if he could do that. And so in a minute, we're going to switch roles. But I have a chance to speak a second time, and I want to make sure you understand how that works as well. That is, I can conclude the debate. Once I get up for the second time, as the mover of the motion, then the debate is over, and you cannot speak again. So the person in this role always waits to the very end, and then I can summarize, I can bring personal views forward at that time. So.
Just to add to the learning experience, Councilor Donald, is very good that during council you can speak once on the motion.
Yeah.
As in executive, you can speak as many times as you like. Only speak once this time for 3 minutes on the main motion.
And so just again, one other thing, because as we're all going along here, this is your opportunity to ask questions of the administration or of the mayor or of other members of council, to be honest with you. But this is also your opportunity when you get up to speak to just offer your own views and thoughts. So hence at the beginning, I represent you as executive committee, but the second time I speak, I can represent myself and my individual views. So I'll sit down for a second here.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. And before we actually have questions from members of council, I want to ask Mr. Schoberg and Mr. Wanzura to provide a background on this report and about the costing. The background would be important. So for both the gentlemen, in your turn to provide background information on this.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Wanzura.
Worship. As outlined in the report, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade has been planned for a number of years. Some of the drivers behind the work that we're doing is around the age of the plant, the population of the city, as well as the standards and regulations that we're required to meet. The plant, as it is constructed, was originally constructed in 1958 in its original location, and over subsequent upgrades over the course of the years, it's been added to, expanded, and met all the treatment requirements throughout the course of the years. Around the regulatory standards, the driver for our change in regulations has been the CCME, the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment, the revised municipal wastewater regulations. These are regulations to harmonize municipal wastewater effluent throughout the country, and the most important things to us are around the requirements around phosphorus discharge for algae growth downstream, and nitrogen discharge, which has acute toxicity for fish species. So these regulations have been a work in progress over many years, and in 2012 recently came into effect under the Federal Fisheries Act. Regarding the plant planning, the financial planning started in earnest in 2008, and during that time the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, led a national lobby for the federal government to financially support municipalities upgrading their wastewater treatment plants under these regulations. The philosophy is if other orders of government are going to require higher treatment standards, other orders of government should contribute to putting those standards into place. There appeared to be an opportunity for funding at that time for these upgrades, but none materialized, unfortunately. And one of the realities about federal funding for these sorts of infrastructure projects is that to qualify, you can't have started already. So part of the work during 2008 and 2009 was working with the FCM around lobbying for additional federal funding. As outlined in the report, in 2011, we retained an engineering team of AECOM, an international design firm. We began the concept designs for the upgraded plant and began to prepare for procurement. One of the things that is outlined in the report, to meet our new treatment limits, a significantly different treatment process and plant is required. When we get to the procurement stage, we'll be looking at the tools available to have this constructed in a way that delivers value for money for the community, and a way to manage risk and manage uncertainty, which results in ultimately lower costs. In January 2013, we're anticipating to have a report to Executive Committee on some of these delivery options for your consideration. So through the planning stages, we've been estimating the cost of construction so that we can do our financial planning although we had no firm timeline, no fixed construction schedule, as we meet all our discharge regulations, the age of the plant was meeting our needs. And the population was not growing as fast as we'd anticipated. So during the planning stages, we'd been estimating for construction and financial planning purposes, but with no fixed construction date. In the spring of 2012, we received confirmation from the Ministry of Environment, the Provincial Ministry of Environment, who does hold our permit, regarding a December 31st, 2016 target to have new regulations and lowered requirements for phosphorus and nitrogen discharge. What that really meant is that it gave us a construction timeline to have an upgraded plant in place and in service by December 31, 2016, and this coincided with the harmonized national municipal wastewater regulations. These dates now put us on a firm construction schedule, and the current estimate that we have for construction, based on completion in 2016, is estimated to be $207 million. That includes an amount for construction inflation that takes into account the accuracy of our estimate and is a budgeting estimate. The last number City Council had in front of them was roughly 9 months ago. That construction estimate was $153 million, subject to construction inflation at 8% per year, plus or minus 20%. This is now a revised estimate that is with a construction schedule and a completion date would be considered all in. So I hope I answered your question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Monsieur. Mr. Schoper, do you have anything to add?
Your Worship, I'll add a couple elements. One, just to, I guess, reinforce the numbers element that Mr. Wanzura spoke to. So, and it's referred to in the report, page 7. There's a table, so refer members to that in terms of the apples-to-apples comparison. And so there's two elements on that table that are worth noting. The Q3 2015 estimated cost previously was $200 million, is now $207 million. So that's made up of two variations. One is the escalation or inflation factor that's considered within the numbers. The other one is the confidence level, or said in other ways, the contingency that's included in the estimate. So as the business area has been moving forward with this plan, they've been able to refine some of these estimates, which is typical in a large plan and as you get closer to a construction period. So at this point, those are the comparable figures. Of course, with the contingency, you can see the ranges in that report as well. What's also worth noting is the debt element. That certainly has not been confirmed yet as we move forward, and there is a distinction. It's referred to in the report in the financial implications sections, but it may be subtle and some may be missing it. There is a distinction between the water and sewer utility and the wastewater treatment plant. So the treatment plant is part of the utility. Our long-range projections for the utility have an estimate of up to $150 million in debt. That's for the utility as a whole. So that's not only the wastewater treatment plant. That could be the various other projects as well. So as we move a bit closer, consider the final model that would be considered in terms of construction. We'll be able to refine these estimates further, of course. But the debt right now is likely in the range of 120 to 135 million is what we're considering as far as the wastewater treatment plant. Of course, there's some factors that we'll continue to monitor as this project goes forward from a financial standpoint, the same as we would with other projects, and especially with considering a larger debt issue such as this, as we'll continue to monitor the financial markets. There is some ability to adjust here. Of course, there is funding in reserves and things that will be allocated. Servicing agreement fees are also allocated to this project as part of the financial plan. So we'll continue to monitor that. Of course, any final decisions happen on the floor of council for the project, as well as for the issuance of debt. So at a later date, those will also be coming forward for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Schoberg, for that. Now, after that background, I'll open the floor to questions. Are any questions from members of council? Councilor Bryce?
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that were asked. So why isn't Saskatoon and Moose Jaw and Estevan and all them getting prepared for this as well?
Swandra?
Mr. Chairman, the permit is issued by Ministry of Environment. It depends on your receiving body and the nature of your treatment plant. Saskatoon, in particular, upgraded its treatment plant to something very similar to what we have in concept here before us, late 1990s. They did that upgrade for their own reasons, but their plant does meet all the regulations. Well, Moose Jaw was in the same boat. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I think they had a $20 million upgrade at their wastewater treatment plant in contemplation of what was proposed by the federal government here.
Thank you. Is it true that the Saskatoon pays much less? And if so, how are they funding it differently than we are?
Swandra?
Your Worship, we do annual surveys of water rates and utility rates across Western Canada. Saskatoon is lower than, say, the Calgarys, Reginas, Edmontons, and Winnipegs, and each city sets their own water rates based on their own needs and what they feel their needs are. What I can tell you is that the water utility is fully funded. It does meet. It has a 20-year financial model which anticipates future capital needs, and it plans appropriately to meet all those needs for the community.
So does Saskatoon not do that through you, Your Worship?
Swandra?
Your Worship, I'd be likely out of my element to comment on exactly how they do their budgeting and financial planning in other cities.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other questions or comments? Councillor Hinks.
Mr. Finder, you are aware of the sewer smell that we had in West Regina, and I know that a lot of the public haven't been to West Regina to smell the sewer smell, but this sewage upgrade will correct a lot of that. Am I right?
Swandra?
Your Worship, currently we have a number of interim projects underway right now, including dredging lagoons, increasing aeration, increasing blower capacity, which will address the problems the northwest part of the city is experiencing right now. The long-term plant will eliminate the use of lagoons for sewage treatment, which will make this significantly better. It is a sewage treatment plant, so it is always going to have an odor around the proximity of it, but it won't be as widespread as it has been.
I know the people that re-elected me to council were concerned about that smell, and I know that this will be a big part in upgrading it. What about our water system? The quality of water?
Swandra?
Your Worship, the city has for many years invested religiously in maintaining a safe, potable water system for the community. In 1989, there was the taste and odor upgrade at Buffalo Pound that built the activated carbon contactors that improved the quality of the water significantly. We are investing in lineal systems, water mains, sewer mains, that sorts of thing. And we do have a significant upgrade plan for Buffalo Pound in the next few years to make sure that we maintain safe and secure potable water.
Now, if we don't do this upgrade, do we have a danger for something like Waka or North Battleford, where there was a boil water and there was some health problems, and I think maybe even some deaths over it? Are we facing something like that if we don't keep it upgraded?
Swandra?
Your Worship, the wastewater treatment plants, the most important thing for our wastewater treatment plant is protection of the environment. This upgrade is driven around reducing our phosphorus to our downstream neighbors, the Wascana Creek and Fort Capel chain of rivers. That will reduce the amount of algae bloom in the summertime, and as well as it will reduce the nitrogen that's present in our discharge, which is harmful for fish and aquatic life.
So could it endanger our water system, though?
No, our water is secure from Buffalo Pound upstream, and our wastewater is discharged downstream into.
Well, that's great, because I know the people that re-elected, when I was on the doorsteps, were telling me that it was really important to do something about the smell, and as well as keeping our water system safe. And I commend you on all your work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Other comments? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report. That was very helpful. Just one question: the rate of inflation we have pinned between 6% and 8% annually. That seems like a lot to me. I know we're in a really hot economy, and inflation is a big issue right now. I'm just wondering if you could speak how that relates to just general inflation in the private construction market. If that is parallel to that, or if this is more so because it's a public project, or
I think construction costs certainly have a difference compared to general inflation, but Mr. Wanzura, you want to add to that?
Your Worship, AECOM, our consulting engineer, advised us on an appropriate construction inflation rate. They do that based on their work in the marketplace in Saskatchewan and in the region. What they're seeing certainly is elevated construction costs across the region. So we feel that 6% is an accurate reflector of what that would be.
Sure.
Councillor Fraser?
And just one follow-up comment while I have the floor is that this is work that has to be done, and I think it's important that we do it right. I also know we've talked about this in past meetings that we actually don't have a demand-side management strategy in plan, and I think we should strongly suggest the utility to look at that their next billing cycle, to have billing that encourages people to use less water. So if there's a way for us to move that forward, I think that'd be good. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Worship. I think most of this has all been covered. I'm just curious of just a Reader's Digest version about why it's so much different in Regina for our wastewater system versus other major centers that are on natural bodies of water. Maybe just a quick little Reader's Digest. What makes us different and unique to other Canadian centers that we've referred to?
Mr. Wanzura.
Your Worship, Regina, I believe, is one of two significant-sized cities that would be considered landlocked, not on a natural large body of water. In Regina's case, we take our water from a shallow man-made lake 70 kilometers away, Buffalo Pound. It is treated to a very high quality. It is pumped 70 kilometers to Regina, redistributed, and then discharged to a very sensitive receiving body in Wascana Creek in the Capel chain. So that would make us different than, say, something like Edmonton or Saskatoon that have much bigger bodies of water.
So dilution is the solution for that pollution, and in our case, we don't have.
You've been dying to say that, haven't you?
I have been. I've been waiting for that. So basically what that means, though, is that how much of our flow makes up Wascana Creek, say this time of year right now? There's not a lot of runoff. There's not a lot of snow melting out there. So how much of that flow is ours?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, except for a few months in the springtime, we are the only flow in Wascana Creek right now.
So, Your Worship, it's critically important that water be to a very high standard. Otherwise, we're potentially poisoning our neighbors further downstream. So it's important that this is done and that it's correct. And we really don't have an alternative here. We have to do the right thing. So thanks, Your Worship, and I'm definitely in support.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Now, Councillor, if you're going to close debate, I'll have a few things to say, and I'll ask you to take the chair, if you don't mind.
Actually, point of order, I think I'm Deputy Mayor. Wouldn't I take your chair?
Well, actually, he chaired Executive Committee, and you weren't here, so he's actually moving the reports from Executive, which is a standard practice. Thank you,
Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Down. Just a quick comment that much of the information that I think is important has been spoken to by our administration. The costing of this new facility, the upgrades, is absolutely essential for what happens downstream. And members will see in the report, we speak of reducing nitrogen and phosphorus and pathogens that ordinarily are exiting the system now. And the idea would be to reduce the algae growth, which would hurt the fish habitat downstream. The provincial regulations have been announced, and they are in effect at the end of 2016, December 31st, 2016. I know the delegation spoke of having no knowledge of what those might be, but those, in fact, have been confirmed by the administration that we are required by law to have this done. So we're meeting a requirement by law, but we're also doing what is a highly technical, complicated facility. And the report outlines, in the report, I believe it's on page 3 or 4, of the types of upgrades we're doing and new facilities being put in place. So this is definitely an expensive proposition, but it is absolutely essential for our city for safe wastewater treatment for those communities downstream. I have no trouble supporting this at all, and I think the most of the early dates or numbers that were shown did not show inflation or contingencies. But now that we're moving forward on the design of this, about 20% I understand of the design, we're now seeing the true costs come out, plus the contingency in the future. So this is very much a transparent report that talks about the cost of an extremely complicated, highly technical, advanced wastewater treatment system. And I think that the citizens should be very happy that we're seeing this kind of production go forward for the safety of not just the Regina residents, but those communities downstream. The chair will be yours now. Councillor O'Donnell to close debate.
Thank you. So just a couple of things that I want to identify, and it may lead into a question or two. So I always say this, given the opportunity when we start talking about wastewater, I always say this. For 100 years, Regina has treated its waste. We are unique in Canada in that process. There are still cities that are dumping raw sewage into their lakes and streams, in fact, into the oceans in Canada. Further to that, to my knowledge, at no time have we ever received any funding addition beyond our own taxpayer base to make these things happen, to my understanding. Now, one of the things I understand, I'd like this verified, is that our date to have this done has been set, not by us, but by another order of government to be done by 2016, 2017. Can I have that confirmed, please?
Your Worship, that is correct.
Thank you. And can I also then ask, there are other communities in Canada, in fact, 1/4 of all communities in Canada need wastewater treatment upgrades, but they are on a different timeline. Can I have that confirmed, please?
Mr. Wanzura?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. The federal government estimates that 25% of Canadian wastewater treatment systems will need some sort of upgrade to meet this regulation. The timing is based on high, medium, and low risk. High-risk communities have a 2020 target, medium risk 2030, low risk 2040.
Thank you for that. So it leads me into another thought. Are there other communities that may be adjacent to Regina that may need upgrades to their wastewater treatment that may be able to tap into ours or partner with us?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, yes, there are.
And are we pursuing that?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, yes, through a regional planning framework, we've talked to some neighboring communities that are in the same boat as us and had some conversations about what that could look like.
Perfect. This is an information report. I'll look for a motion, or look for a concurrence, please.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Donnell has closed debate on this. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. MR 12-4. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which we refer to as FCM, Big City Mayor's Caucus, BCMC meeting. Now, this also is a receive and file report. So what happened was back in November, on behalf of Mayor Fougere, I attended the Big City Mayor's Caucus. I'd like to report to you on that. Back in the...
I need a seconder on the motion.
Oh, that's true.
Councillor Hawkins moves a second. He's a seconder, okay?
Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you for that. And the second part was back in the spring, I ran for election to be a board member for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I was elected. This council agreed that they would support me in that endeavor, and so I attended my first board meeting, which was part of the advocacy days on Parliament Hill back in November as well, and I wish to give you some updates on this. So, first of all, a little background. Minister Denny LaBelle, who is in charge of infrastructure for the federal government in Canada, made a commitment that, in fact, that the federal government would look at some long-term funding and a type of formula for all of Canada, not just Regina, but for all of Canada some time ago. As part of that process, there was a series of roundtable discussions of which there was 9 held across Canada. And back in July, I represented not only the city of Regina, but in fact, the province of Saskatchewan in terms of municipalities and making our needs known. And what I'd like to do today is just make sure that you have some of that information. Currently, municipalities, and this is a common statement that you will hear, receive only 8% of the funding of all orders of government. We only get 8 cents out of every dollar of tax. So many people will tell you that we cannot afford to do all of the things with infrastructure based on that funding formula. So we need to have some additional funding from the federal government, actually from the federal and provincial government. Now, the Federation of Municipalities consulted with all municipalities in Canada. Now, this is from large cities to the very smallest of jurisdictions, and asked, and the big city mayors endorsed, 3 fundamental objectives: build a stronger economy and create new jobs, ensure long-term value for money invested, and leverage support and investment from all 3 orders of government, the private sector, and other infrastructure stakeholders. So one of the arguments that you have heard on this floor many times is that we must engage the private sector. They, in fact, are one of those organizations that have to deliver on infrastructure. So if we can make a long-term commitment to them, they can build up their resources, their manpower, their equipment, and so on, to deliver on what we would like to see done. I want to just switch a little bit to the advocacy so you can understand a little bit about what happened. When we were in Ottawa, and there was a significant group of us, we visited with 130 individual members of Parliament. We visited with senators. In fact, I visited personally with the Saskatchewan caucus for the federal government, as well as Pamela Wallen was there in that same meeting. There were 2 caucus briefings besides just Saskatchewan. There were 3 political party leaders who addressed us. We were represented by the federal government by Minister LaBelle, whereas Bob Ray and Thomas Mulcair and I can't think of Ms. May from the Green Party. It was interesting as well that the Prime Minister also welcomed some people in. In fact, he had 2 meetings with a different group of people and spent up to 30 minutes with them. Now, here's some of the principles that are different than normal asks. In terms of long-term, we need to build on a decades, not years approach. Many programs before were always in the neighborhood of 3 years or 5 years, and even in the Building Canada Fund, which was unique, was 7 years long. We've asked for 20 years. What was interesting to us in terms of all of our meetings was that there was no pushback on that. They actually thought that that made sense. Deliver secure, predictable funding, not more application forms. We need to have money that we know that we can count on for many, many years so that we here in Regina, like other places, can build up our resources. Return the federal investments to a sustainable level. I'll tell you what that means. Years and years ago, the federal government used to own more than half of the infrastructure in Canada, and that has now changed significantly. We in municipalities actually own over 60. I think it's 62 or 63% of the infrastructure. So there's been you can use a new word now, download. Well, it's actually not a very new word, but there's been a reversal in this type of thing. So we own it, and we have to look after it. And leverage resources from the provinces and territories as well as the private sector. We think that the way that this federal government has always operated is they partner with each of the provinces, and we think that's very healthy. So if they put some money in, the province will put some money in, we put some money in, and then we carry on. Now, I think you need to understand a couple of things because I'll reference it in a later report. The federal government made the gas tax permanent. It is the one funding formula that is in legislation. Now, that is to be applauded because all the other types of funding that we get, in fact, are at the whim of the government of the day. Actually, no different than how we do things sometimes, by the way. So they had the Building Canada Fund, the Economic Action Plan, and now they're talking about long-term infrastructure. I'll lay out what we asked for specifically, but there is a link between job creation and economic viability, and I'll lay that out for you a little bit. So it was a 20-year term. We would ask that the gas tax, which, by the way, is $2 billion, and when I talk to you a little bit later on, you'll see that in this community, we have over $7 million of that coming our way just for road construction. I'll show you that in a little bit. We asked for a core economic infrastructure fund. Now, this is a $2.5 billion fund. This would be new money. And we would like to and suggest that $1 billion of that dollars be used for cutting commute times. Now, you know about Toronto, you know about Vancouver and so on, but it also has got to be an efficient system for us to be able to improve our transit system. The Building Canada Fund, we are asking for $1.25 billion. In other words, please continue that program. That program ends in 2014. Actually, it has already ended because the funding has already been allocated. So there is no new dollars in 2013, but some of the dollars are still left to be used. What we had also asked for in there, and based on our previous discussion, we're asking that of that $1.25 billion, a fully $300 million will be dedicated to wastewater treatment plants. That is new. Despite the change in regulations, that has not existed before. And then we're looking at the total long-term infrastructure program totals some $5.75 billion. Now, what's interesting about that from my point of view is we're really talking only about 2 to 3% of the overall federal budget to be used for infrastructure in Canada. It's a small amount of money compared to all the other things. We've asked for, as I mentioned about the gas tax, to be indexed because that $2 billion has been around for a while, and if we don't inflate it at 3% a year, we'll start losing that value as well. Now, I want to make a comment as well about P3s. It's been an item of discussion not only on this floor of Council, but in other places in Canada. We asked for some very specific things. We asked that they do not mandate P3s. We asked that they integrate support for P3s into all long-term infrastructure programs rather than developing a segregated program dedicated solely to P3s. We want P3s to stand on their own, to show their value, and to have their judgments done accordingly. I'll finish with the thought that I began with early on. The biggest return for the federal dollars, and by the way, for every dollar that they invest, they get back 42 cents, just so we understand why I use the word investment. The biggest return of the federal dollar is in municipal infrastructure. It does more to create jobs, benefit families and businesses than any other form of investment, we believe, much greater than any kind of tax reduction. Property taxpayers and local governments cannot renew infrastructure on their own. The last thing I will tell you is about a program, and it's called the Great Canadian Challenge on Infrastructure, the Great Infrastructure Challenge. There is a website. There is an ability for all Canadians to get engaged, to click on that website and simply explain to the federal politicians why this is important. And also publicly, the federal government, Minister Flaherty, has asked for all Canadians to comment on the budget. Every single person that I believe, anyway, you can comment yourselves, but I believe every single one of you that were elected recently heard at the door the importance of roads and sidewalks, and then heard the importance of our water and the pipes in the ground. This is a very fundamental program for us, and I ask for your endorsement on this, please.
Other comments? Councillor Dunn, if you take the chair, please, just for a moment.
So just, again, an explanation. As chair of the meeting, the mayor cannot speak from this chair, so he has to ask someone else to take the chair for him so he can speak from this.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Just a couple of additional comments, and thank you, Councillor Dunn, for attending the City Mayor's Caucus, Big City Mayor's Caucus, and that will be a role that I will play. This came about just after the election, and I felt it was important to be in Regina for purposes of local issues. All that being said, there's another element of importance for the Big City Mayor's Caucus and FCM in the board meeting. We do expect to see in 2013 we're hoping a federal announcement on infrastructure renewal, which will cascade into a provincial announcement, we hope, sometime in 2013 for the 2014 calendar year and fiscal year. But within this meeting that took place, there was also the Housing Advocacy Working Group. And from my perspective, this is a very key element for our community, and I certainly talked about a lot of that during the election, and I intend to move forward on that. So members will see in the report there is a discussion of the next priority of FCM will be housing. Once we hopefully have the long-term infrastructure program put to rest by the federal government. The report talks about that, we're looking for, I guess, certainly in the past, the $1.7 billion federal affordable housing agreement will expire by 2020. We also have concerns about their $500 million they put out annually. It will be expiring. So there is a push to be had to ensure that affordable housing on a national level is pursued. The report talks about some of the housing objectives of the Big City Mayor's Caucus, and I'll refer you to page 5 of the report. These are overarching questions and concerns on a national level which have to be answered, certainly defining the problem itself, whether it's unique and attending to reframing issues on the housing debate on a broad sense of engagement and consumption, making the case for long-term planning and resources, in detail role of the federal government in housing and the need for intergovernmental partnerships, highlighting the investment cities are making, dollar figures, bylaws, incentives, programs, what tools cities are using. All these are very important questions to be asked. But on behalf of the City of Regina, I will be working very hard, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to ensure that the interests of the City of Regina on housing are front and center. and I will be hoping to work very hard on the working group on housing and report back to this council as required. This will dovetail very much so on the ground, hands-on summit that we were putting together early in 2013. So again, this report is received and filed, and I hope that members of council will support the motion. You will be receiving, or we're seeing next, there will be a motion that's coming forward that is an endorsement of the work done by FCM and the good work done by Councillor O'Donnell in Ottawa, and I would ask that you consider that report and support that motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call the question on MR 12-4. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. As you indicated, I would like to bring a motion forward. So this would be an action item based on the discussion that you've heard on the previous report, and it is the development of a new long-term federal plan for municipal infrastructure funding. This is a little bit long.
Would you like to perhaps move it, then we'll get a seconder for it?
I'll move it.
Seconder, please. Councillor Young seconds that. Councillor O'Donnell, the floor
Thanks
is
very
yours.
much. So now I have the ability to read this, and again, this is longer than a normal motion, but there's some information here that I want to make sure we got across. Whereas the City of Regina's greatest opportunity and challenge is the fact that we are currently experiencing unprecedented economic and population growth, and along with this growth comes fiscal challenges and responsibilities. Whereas the City of Regina, like other Canadian municipalities, relies heavily on property tax, a regressive and insufficient funding source is the major source of revenue. Whereas municipalities receiving approximately 8 cents of every tax dollar collected lack the resources and fiscal tools required to deal with infrastructure needs while responding to a growing list of responsibilities in areas such as affordable housing, transportation, and the environment. Whereas the federal investments over the past few years have helped to slow the decline of our cities and communities, and the Government of Canada has committed to develop a new long-term plan for municipal infrastructure funding in consultation with municipal and provincial territorial governments. Whereas all orders of government have benefited in the short term from the federal government's Economic Action Plan, the Gas Tax Fund, and the acceleration of the Building Canada Fund, with improvements to local economies, unemployment rates, and the improvements to municipal infrastructure. Whereas investment in infrastructure is the best tool available to stimulate the economy and create economic development opportunities, evidenced by the fact that for every additional $1 billion invested in infrastructure, the federal government will create more than 11,000 jobs, twice as many as a $1 billion tax cut. Whereas we have an opportunity and obligation to work in partnership with the federal and provincial government and the private sector in a cohesive, coordinated manner, with all partners accepting and sharing responsibility, while creating and implementing long-term, sustainable, and innovative solutions to resolving infrastructure deficits for all orders of government. And whereas the City of Regina has urgent and continuing core infrastructure needs, which includes roadways, bridges, sidewalks, water, and wastewater, as well as the need to update the wastewater treatment plant. Be it resolved that the City of Regina Council endorses the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, Target 2014 campaign, launched to ensure the new infrastructure plan reflects municipal priorities across the country and is fully implemented in 2014 upon the expiry of existing programs. Be it further resolved to urge the Minister of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities to work with FCM and municipalities to ensure the new long-term infrastructure plan meets the core infrastructure needs of cities and communities. If I could, Your Worship, I'll just comment, by endorsing this, you are joining a whole host of other communities asking for both long-term funding, for it to be implemented for a construction season in 2014, and recognizing the fact that we need federal dollars and provincial dollars to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any comments on the motion? Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I just want to speak in favor of the motion. I think it's very important that our new members understand the role that FCM plays and how important a role it is to allow elected municipal officials to speak together as a united voice. The gas tax is an example of one of those major implemented programs that came through because of that unified voice from FCM. So again, I support 100% the work that Councillor O'Donnell has done. Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other questions or comments? Councillor O'Donnell, if you want to take the floor again.
Your Worship.
There's one point I'd add, in addition to what you said, Councillor O'Donnell, is that this is a culmination of negotiations with the federal government who also want this as well. The FCM, on behalf of all municipalities, is articulating a plan, Target 2014, and is unified across the country. That's absolutely correct. But also the federal government has indicated some time ago it wants to have a long-term sustainable infrastructure program. And our province, the province of Saskatchewan, has also indicated it too wants this as well. So we have a unity of three levels of government who want to go forward. Of course, the devil's in the details. How do we get there? That is the discussion that's been going on. So I would certainly urge members of council to support this, not least of which because it is the right thing to do, but it's also reflective of virtually every municipality in the country agreeing with this motion and the substance and the intent of Target 2014. Councillor O'Donnell to close debate.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there will be two results from this. One will be a letter sent through the Mayor's office that will endorse this if you so approve this motion. And the other thing I just want to highlight is that part of the funding request and part of the work that we did through the National Infrastructure Summit was that innovation was to be part of this. We cannot continue to keep doing things the same way. You've heard that many times here on the floor of council. So part of the request also was that they endorse and understand that innovation has to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move on to Administration's report, CM 12-6, application for severance approval at 2719 Macara. I need a motion for that, please.
I'll move it.
Councillor Hicks moves it, and a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Councillor Bryce. Okay. We would like perhaps an explanation as to what this is. This is a recommendations to refuse an application for severance approval at 2719 Macara. Mr. Carlson, you want to give a background on this?
Yes, Your Worship. So what a severance is a subdivision process. And our subdivision bylaw and the Planning and Development Act require that if a subdivision isn't going to meet or result in lots that won't meet the zoning bylaw or the standards set out in the zoning bylaw, that subdivision application has to be refused. And the only mechanism for the variation or the variance to be received or approved is through the appeals board. So the necessary process is to have council refuse or deny the application, and then this way the applicant has the right to appeal the process. So that's what this applicant is seeking here. There's they don't meet the lot width zoning bylaw standard by centimeters.
Right. Okay. So we're all clear on what the report is. Any questions on that? Any comments? Go ahead.
Just a question.
Fraser, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the administration. So will planning still have to see this, though? Like, is there an appeal and then it goes back through planning? Or is it just, it skips planning altogether? Thanks.
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, this wouldn't come back to the Planning Commission. This is an administrative process, so they'd go through the appeals board.
Councillor Fraser?
And then back to council?
No, I believe it doesn't go back to it. Come back to us at all. I don't believe so. Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, you're correct. It wouldn't come back to council at all.
It's been delegated authority. Councillor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just as a point of clarity then, because as I look at this image on here, I see that it's, the lot is 38.1 meters in length, but the width would only be 7.3 meters per lot for a total of 14.6 meters. Is that correct? Based on what they're, I guess that's, I'm just looking at Appendix 3.
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, that is correct. So it's the lot frontage that they wouldn't comply with. So it's supposed to be 7.5 opposed to 7.3.
Okay.
So it's that 20 centimeters that they're looking for variance through the appeals board after it's refused here.
Okay. So there is still a potential then that they may be able to move that forward through the appeals board?
I think that's the intent, is to we allow them to appeal it so they can actually go forward with the application. Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, that's correct. So this would facilitate that going to the appeals board. And as our report notes, we don't typically take a position, but we see this as a positive sort of infill development opportunity.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, what I see here is the opportunity to take a lot and make it work, but it just happens to be just a little bit too narrow. So because the rules around the city are very fixed and very hard, they require, they do have some flexibility, but require going to another board to do that. So I appreciate it and its support. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Committee reports, Community Protective Services, CR 12-168, automatic vehicle location project. Councilor Flagel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Community Protective Services, I'd like to recommend the following CR 12-168. There's 5 points to the recommendations. I want to read the first one so everybody's got an idea what's going on. City Council authorized Deputy City Manager of City Operations or his or her designated to negotiate and approve terms of amended addendum to the Research and Development Trial Agreement related to transit automated vehicle locations, basically a GPS system for bus tracking. The AVL trial dated as of September 1st, 2011 between the city and 101-1504419 Saskatchewan Limited, operating under the business name of CRL Engineers, to extend the term of the trial for an additional 9 months, concluding on September 30th, 2013. The other thing talks about funding, then again for proposal, authorizing the Deputy Mayor for operations and addendums and so on and so forth, and we recommend approval.
Councilor Flagel, just perhaps you can provide some background as to what this is. If you can just clarify, this is actually a trial that's been going on for some time for people to find out what's happened, where the bus is en route. And
this is tracking the bus itself to know where they are, if they're waiting 15 more minutes or an hour, what the situation is. And back before my time, it looks like they started this, haven't quite got the data they wanted to go forward with the total project. So, okay, we're hoping that we can get approval on that tonight.
Good. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on it? Councilor O'Donnell?
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I ask how long we've been doing Transit Live, please?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, I believe mid-2011 we started the pilot with CRL Engineering.
Thank you. And have we noticed in the last while there's been any increase in transit ridership?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, in the last year we've seen about a 10% increase in ridership. We estimate about 2.5% of that is due to the customer experience with Transit Live.
Thank you. Can I get a brief explanation of how it works?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, so every one of our 106 buses are outfitted with a GPS locator. That location is fed real time back to a system server that CRL Engineering has. Our customers can log online on a PC terminal, on a mobile device, on a tablet. They can program their start and destination. They can find out when their next bus is coming, and it helps them do their route planning. And they can actually get a text 2 minutes ahead of when their bus comes to their anticipated stop, so they don't have to wait out in the cold. They can plan their departure to the stop. We've had outstanding positive feedback on this initiative.
Thank you. So we have some cold days, Your Worship, right now. It's certainly not a necessary evil anymore to stand outside at a bus stop and hope and pray that the bus will show up. In fact, with a mobile device or with your phone at home, the old landline, you can check and see when the bus is coming, and you know exactly when to go out there. So I think part of the notion here as well is to extend the trial period. So for a couple of reasons. One is to get some more data to make sure it works. But I think it's also got to be noted that this is a project that was done by folks who work out of the University of Regina. So this is local. This has also been a project that has other cities having a look at it, if not using it. And so we are on the trial still. So we are not only, we're the guinea pigs for this a little bit. So I think it's worthwhile to carry on. So for another 9 months before we go permanent on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. To the administration, the cost is $375,000 to $400,000. An explanation as to how that will be resourced. Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, as part of the pilot in 2011, we reallocated some money through new revenues and new ridership. And what we're proposing to do is continue to reallocate some of that money from internal adjustments of routes and ridership growth to fund this on the long-term basis.
Thank you for that. Councilor Fundura?
Thank you, Worship. To the administration, with this GPS system, let's say if one bus is running late, and would the other one wait for a bus that's waiting? Is this kind of what we're using with the GPS to navigate and to make sure the timing is right? Is this kind of thing that communication go between the bus drivers, or how would this work? To you, Mr. Worship.
Your Worship, the primary use is to help our customers plan their ride, but from a management perspective, it helps us monitor our on-time performance, make sure that we are at our timing points when we need to be, and adjust our schedules accordingly.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dura. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. Does it tell you which bus is handicap accessible and which is not?
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, yes, it does.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for the administration. Yeah, I'm going to support this motion. I think this is really, really great. I think it's great we've had a 10% increase in ridership. I'm just curious if there's a mechanism, given that we're still in a trial phase, is there a mechanism for citizen and bus driver feedback? I've used this a few times, and it's there's lots of good things to say about it. I think there's always room for improvement, and I'm just wondering if in a year's time when this comes back, if it'll be a real competition then, or just what? Thanks.
Mr. Wanzura?
Your Worship, I'm going to ask Mr. Bells to comment on the user feedback.
Mr. Bells, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe there is a link through their website, CRL advertising. It says contact us, and I believe you can leave feedback right on to the website there.
Thank you for that. No other questions or comments? I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CR 12-169, Keith Knox Award.
The Community Protective Services recommends that the youth category in the Municipal Heritage Award be named the Keith Knox Award in honor of Keith Knox. And committee has recommended approval on this.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. We're all clear in this report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move to Executive Committee reports. CR 12-170, Advance Approval of Capital Projects. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. The recommendation is that advanced approval of $24,053,000 be provided for the 2013 general capital projects, and $6 million be provided for the 2013 utility capital projects as detailed in the body of this report. I'm going to make reference to a few things so that everybody understands where that money goes, but also make sure that everybody understands that in a normal year, that is not an election year, we would be in fact probably looking at a final budget more or less at this time of the year. We are not in a normal year, so therefore what we're trying to do here is make sure that some items can go out for tender early so that we run a normal project and a normal process. All of these items, while maybe being agreed to today, will be included in the budget, but the budget is not finalized, and so we are going to approve some funding, but there is other dollars to be included in many other projects. So if I could, Your Worship, I'm going to just mention a couple of things. $15,643,000 for street infrastructure renewal. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a number of these dollars come from the gas tax grant. $3,660,000 for civic fleet replacement. So this is anything from garbage trucks to light trucks to turf equipment. $2.5 million for the Smith Street reconstruction. That is 12th Avenue to 11th Avenue. So we know as part of the downtown plan that we need to look at how we handle transit, which is we were just talking about. And so this is an upgrade to the road as well as the infrastructure underneath and all of the utilities as part of that. The next one is $1.5 million for bridge infrastructure renewal, specifically the Argyle Overpass Bridge. $400,000 for the outdoor pools program. We know we have aging pools. This is an investment in that summer program. And $350,000 for a concrete slip form replacement. That's a particular piece of equipment that is now 25 years old. And finally, $6 million for the Southeast Quadrant Detention. That is a water retention area just off of Victoria Avenue interchange. So those are the projects that we're asking for early approval so that they can go out to tender. When we can go tender early, it means that we can get the best price possible. Everybody can gear up on these projects and get done. We'll be looking for concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Any questions? Councillor Murray.
Did we have a seconder on the motion? I would second it.
Did we not get a seconder on that? Okay, we did not. Okay.
I'd be happy to second it.
You moved it, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Murray seconded it. Okay, good. Thanks for catching that. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CR 12-171 is the next report, 2013 Community Investment Allocation to Committees. Councillor O'Donnell.
I will move the recommendations and look for a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Second it. Councillor Hinks.
And they read that the City Council allocates $3,391,100 for community investments in 2013 to the Community and Protective Services Committee to allow for community investments to be provided to funded agencies without delay, and that the 2013 community investment allocations to the Finance and Administration Committee and Executive Committee be referred to the 2013 budget. Again, these are organizations that operate year-round. We want to give them some money right away. It's a commitment on our part that we're funding these programs. Community associations carry on, and so this will again be considered as part of the budget process. We will look for concurrence, please.
Comments or questions on the report? All those in favor? Question, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two quick questions, actually. One is just to do with the projected balance at the end of the year. I'm just curious why there's so much money left. I know there was a transition in how we allocate funds this year, so I'm guessing that's the explanation lies in that. And number two, a quick question, just because this money goes to a committee, I'm just wondering if there's anything built in to account for inflation and that sort of thing. I know some of the other money we allocate is to organizations that actually have the power to request more money, and I know that the inflation pressures in the city that we see in all other areas of the budget are faced by the organizations that receive this money, but they don't necessarily have the mechanism to ask for the pool of money to increase. So,
Chris Holden, please. You want to answer that? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Fougere. A good question. We've just undertaken a community investment review. The amount of money that we're asking for in 2013 is the same as in previous years. We're hoping that as we implement the new community investment programs, that some organizations will receive maybe less funding than they have in the past. And that's because we're really looking to fund organizations that provide programs and services that align with the strategies and priorities of the City of Regina. So we're hoping that over the next year or so, we'll be able to provide some inflationary increases and not have a required increase in budget. We'll also, though, use some funding that will be in the reserves so that there's transition funding provided to organizations, so organizations that have been funded don't see funding suddenly being pulled away from them.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fraser?
Thanks for that. So then just to follow up, page 3 says projected balance as of December 31st is $832,000. Is that the reserve fund then?
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, it is. That $832,000, part of that is just a financial transaction process in terms of some of the money that hasn't been provided to organizations but is committed and allocated carries forward to the reserve. And we'll be looking at putting in some new financial procedures in 2013 to avoid that balance looking as excessive as it does.
Councillor Fraser?
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to CR 12-172, Regina Appeal Board appointments. Councillor O'Donnell.
That's correct, Your Worship. Regina Appeal Board, this is elected official board appointments. If I could have a seconder, I'll speak to the motion.
You're moving the motion. The seconder, please.
I would second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Young seconds it.
Thank you. And that is that Councillors Hawkins, Murray, and Young be appointed to the Regina Appeal Board, and that their term of office be from tomorrow to next December 31st.
Great. Okay, I'll call the question on the report. Is there any questions on that at all? No questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving to interim reports for several agencies. This is one for the Regina Regional Opportunities Commission. Councillor O'Donnell.
Correct. Again, Regina Regional Opportunities Commissioner Rock, that the Deputy City Manager and CFO be directed to make payment of $461,450 to Rock. That is based on 50% of what we gave them in 2012. And again, all of this goes to the budget procedures, but we're giving them advance to carry on. I'm looking for a seconder, please.
Seconder, please.
I'll second that motion.
Councillor Burnett seconds that.
Thank you. Looking for concurrence.
Any comments or questions on this? It's a standard practice every year. Call the question. Are those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CR 12-174, interim payment for Wascana Center Authority. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks again. This is for Wascana Center Authority based on the same You notice in the last time we talked about 50%. Well, this time we're looking at 25% of the allocation from 2012 to go to Wascana Center. Total $477,225. And I would look for a seconder.
Seconder, please.
Second it.
Councillor Hinks.
And again, this is so that Wascana Center can keep carrying on until we finish our budget deliberations. They typically get their money that we support them. We fund them along with the provincial government, the university, as well as the City of Regina, and we do this on a, I think it's quarterly basis, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, thank you. And so we're looking for the first payment.
Questions or comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CR 12-175, interim payment to Regina Exhibition Association Limited.
That's right. So Real or Everest Place, as we call it, again, that the Deputy City Manager and CFO will be directed to make a payment of $200,000 to Real. This is now 50% of what they got in 2012. And again, the additional funds are up to council at budget time. I have a seconder, please.
Seconder.
Second it.
Thank you. We're looking for concurrence.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to some appointments to the Regina Region Opportunities Commission. Councillor Donald.
That's correct. So I am going to read out the appointments, and then I will look for a second, if I could, that Ms. Carrie Lemieux be appointed to a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2013 to end on 31st of 2015, that Mr. Tony Coppola, Mr. Neil Donnelly, and Mr. Edmund Bellegarde be appointed for 2-year terms, that is, they would end in 2014, and that all members continue to hold office for the term indicated or until successors are appointed. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please, for that.
I'll second the motion.
Councillor Young seconds it. There was a tie, so I'll give it to Councillor Young.
Tie goes to the lady. Thank you. And so concurrence, please.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 12-177, appointments to Regina Bid. Councillor Donald.
Thank you again, Your Worship. I will read this out, that Mr. Steve Enns, Mr. Sean Grice, Mr. Doug Kozak, and Mr. Anthony Marquardt be appointed as persons who are electors of the city and are employed in the district for terms effective January 1st, 13 to December 31st, 15, that Ms. Jamie Kilkenny, Mr. Dave Mohar, and Ms. Elena Young be appointed as persons who are electors of the city or are employed in the district for terms from 13 to December 31st, 14, and that Mr. Garth Tomlinson be appointed as a person who is an elector in the city and or employed in the district for the term January 1st, 13 to December 31st, 13. And if I could have a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Bryce.
I actually have a point of order. I didn't realize we were starting to second executive committee reports when, I know we're using it as a teaching one tonight, but I don't remember seconding executive reports before. So is this something that we're going to be doing or not?
Well, we are doing it tonight, but we have been seconding usually. You're right, though. I think executive committee reports is not seconded, but on other committee reports they are, and other outside reports.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, looking for concurrence, please.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Appointments to the Regina Warehouse District, Report 178, Councillor Donald.
Thank you again. So I'll read them out. Mr. David Froh, Mr. Brian Miazga, Mr. Craig Rutherspoon, Ms. Maureen Harrison, Mr. Taylor Roadhouse, and Mr. J.P. Ellison be appointed as citizen members of the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District for the term January 1st, 13 to December 31st, 14, please.
Comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 79, this is a significant report on citizen appointments to committees, 2013, Councillor Donald.
That's right. So this is a large one, and there is not only the report, but then there's the appendix. So I'm going to speak to the overall report, and then I'll make a comment to the appendix, and we'll go from there. So if I could just have a moment. Now, so that this is about citizens' appointments to our committees of council, and that in all cases that they be from January 1st to December 31st of 2013, unless otherwise noted. And in the appendix, many of these go to 14 or 15. There are variable terms or staggered terms. That's become accepted practice for us. That the nominees of the organizational representatives on the remaining committees outlined in the attached chart be appointed for terms of office effective January 1st to December 31st, 13, or unless otherwise noted, and again they are. that Mr. Bob Linner and Mr. Bob Watt be reappointed as citizen members on the Civic Employees Long-Term Disability Plan Administrative Board and Civic Employees Superannuation and Benefit Plan Administrative Board for the term expiring December 31st, 2013, that the members appointed to each board, commission, and committee continue to hold office for the term indicated for each vacancy or until their successors are appointed. Now, I am not going to read the whole attachment, but I am asking for an endorsement on all of those people as presented to Council.
And as was passed to Executive Committee. Any comments or questions on that? Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think there's one that we need to make a revision on. Sorry, I turned this thing sideways. Under the Board of Police, Vic Pankrat should read Ron Rasmussen. On there.
I was seconded for that change. Seconded by Councillor
Thanks,
Price.
Your Worship.
Any comments or questions on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The report as amended. Councillor O'Donnell.
May I just make a comment, please?
Just before you do that, though, this will be your second time to speak. I wonder if anybody else has any comments. Okay, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks for allowing me to close debate. I just want to recognize that we had an awful lot of people apply for these committees. We ask for those applications each October, and then we as council look through those. And so we are, one, grateful for all of the people that express interest. Two, I want you to understand that there's been some rotation, a significant rotation on a lot of our committees, that some people have sat for a long time and that there has been some movement. It is meant to be such that we have a rotation into these committees so that many people get a chance to offer their services, and we are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Call for the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have a report, CR 12-188. This is one added to our agenda tonight. This is the ratifying collective agreement with the Regina Civic Middle Management Association. And prior to this going forward, for a motion, just perhaps a word from the administration background on the report. Mr. Davies.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councillor O'Donnell, in keeping with other reports, may want to comment on the content, but one point I do want to make sure Council is aware of. This recommendation was subject to a ratification vote by CMM, and I can report that we've received an email from the President of CMM indicating that they have indeed ratified that. So that subject too has been met for the purposes of Council's consideration tonight.
That's very good news. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Councillor O'Donnell, you want to introduce the report, please?
I will bring this report forward now on behalf of Executive Committee. And first of all, express great gratitude that this was handled so efficiently. Specifically, there's an 18-month term. It ends on December 31st. I believe that should be, is that 13 or 14? I'm just not sure. I don't have a date here, but I think it's 14. Am I correct?
Mr. Davies?
So it's 13 and 14 as I read this, but 13.
Mr. Mayor, it is 13 and 14.
Thank you very much. And with regards to a general wage increase, the tentative agreement includes a 3.5 increase effective January 1st, 2013. For the entire term of the agreement, 18 months, there will be no increase on January 1st, 2014. The increase would equate to a 2.6 annually for 2013 and 2014. And this is a really good news. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from Council? I agree this is great news. Great story and great work done by the administration on behalf of the citizens of the city. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we move to CR 112-189, which is out of scope 2013 general wage increase. Mr. Davis, do you have any other opening comments on this one before we consider the report?
Your Worship, I guess the only comment that I would want to make sure we're clear on here is this is not a negotiated settlement. Our out-of-scope employees are not subject to bargaining. But this is, and therefore the employer has the right to offer settlement, and this is what the executive is recommending to Council.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. So from Executive Committee, we are recommending that the out-of-scope employees receive a 2.6% general wage increase effective January 1st, 2013. Look for concurrence.
Thank you for that. Any comments on the report? All those in favor? Councillor Fraser.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, to the administration. And this is, just curious, this is a 12-month settlement. 2.6 over 12 months.
Your Worship, that's correct. 1 year, yes.
Other comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll go to CR 112-180, which is a newspaper advertising agreement.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll happily rise to bring forward this from the Finance Administration Committee. This is, as you referred to, the newspaper advertising agreement. There are two parts in this, and one that the Executive Director in Governance and Strategy and or his or her delegate be authorized to negotiate and improve the terms of new advertising agreements with the Regina Leader-Post, beginning in 2013 and expiring in the end of 2014. Such agreement to include the printing and distribution of the city's leisure guides for 2013. And then number two, that the city solicitor be city clerk be authorized to execute the agreements after review and approval from the city solicitor. And that'd be our motion, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Fraser.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Question for administration. Given that this is such a big print job, I'm wondering if we have just what's the process to get here? Is there an open bidding process, or are there enough people in the city to actually
Your Worship, I'm going to turn this over to Nathan Morrison from Communications.
Mr. Morrison?
Through you, Your Worship, this is a sole source contract through the Leader Post as they're deemed the sole proprietor of. They're the best. They're in the best position in the community to facilitate our city page advertising each week.
Councillor Fraser?
And as for the printing, like it seems like it's sort of a parcel deal. I'm wondering if that's tenured or what. Thanks.
Mr. Morrison?
Can I seek clarification through Your Worship on the printing regarding the leisure guides? Yes, through Your Worship, the printing and distribution goes through the Leader Post. We've identified in the administration report that we feel that there's opportunity for us to improve that service in 2014, and we're asking for 2013 for a continuation of what has been negotiated with Leader Post. But for 2014, we'll look at an alternate service delivery model.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fraser?
Okay, it seems to me that that's a big enough contract that we should probably have an open bidding process for it, but just a suggestion for years to come.
Thank you for that. Any comments by the administration on that? Okay. Call the question on 180. All those. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
I'd just like to ask for if we can have a further clarification on what might be planned in terms of an alternate service delivery model and what you're looking at.
Mr. Morrison, please.
Through you, Your Worship, administration in a collaborative effort between the communications branch and the community services area are looking to streamline the leisure guides. We recognize that there will likely always be a print element of the guides, but as times are changing, our community has one of the greatest online penetration rates in the country. We feel that we can deliver this through online services. In fact, just starting on November 28th, we started a demonstration project with a supplier where we can now facilitate the hard copy of the guide online, and we can link directly with our online registration.
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel this is a very good initiative, and I encourage you in forwarding it.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move to Planning Commission Report 182. Councillor Flagel? This is Planning Commission. This is the proposed renaming of portions of Elgard Drive and Hawkstone.
I got it.
Okay. Okay.
So this is the proposed renaming of portions of Elgard Drive and Hawkstone subdivision. This was just a simple request to change the name of a street. This was identified as an issue both by the developer as well as by the administration. I don't want to say that we're going to punt Mr. Elgard and add in Mr. Galloway, but in fact, we just need to clarify so that when people go out to use the area, they know which street to use. There was a little pun there.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Dowell. Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll go to Report 183, Golf Course Fee Schedule, Community Protective Services. Councillor Flagel. Nope. 183. This is Golf Course Fee Schedule.
Community Protective Services, 12183, the revision to for golf course fees for 2013 to 2015 be set as recommended by Community and Protective Services. Look for concurrence.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Any comments on this? Comments or questions on the report? This is a fee schedule for 2013 to 15. I have one question, if I can ask from the chair, just for the administration to clarify the methodology of the increases, how we're arriving at those numbers. Just a summary for members of council and the public listening. Mr. Wanzura.
Your Worship, the city owns 5 golf courses, and we operate 4 through a contract operator, Western Golf Management. All of the golf courses are run on a full cost recovery basis. That is that all of the revenues earned or received from golfing rounds fully funds the operation and the multi-year capital program for our golf courses. So we do annual customer surveys. We score very highly. 85 or 90% of our customers feel they get good value for money at the city-owned courses, and the proposed rates provide the necessary revenues to upgrade our facilities for the long term and are competitive in the marketplace.
Thank you for that. Comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flagel.
CR 12-184 Community Development Recreation Park fees and charges for 2013 fees and charges is outlined in Appendix A, Schedule 8 to be approved. The city solicitor to be instructed to prepare an amendment to the Community Services Fee Bylaw 2011 to incorporate the fees and charges provided in this report. We recommend concurrence.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Again, from the administration, just to provide the rationale and methodology for providing these fee increases over time. Mr. Holden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. These fees and charges are for outdoor athletic surfaces, so ball diamonds, football fields, soccer fields. And we do a analysis of costs in terms of what are other service providers in the community charging. We consult with the various user groups of the facilities to ensure that their programs can sustain an increase. And again, these fees are in this year just a straight 3% cost of inflation increase.
Thank you for that. Councillor Donald.
I just want to make a follow-up comment. Mr. Holden will know exactly which I speak. We have, whether it is in this area where it's fields, etc., and whether we talk about ice pads or anything like that, we subsidize all of this. I have no problem with the subsidy. The problem for me is that we subsidize at all different rates for all of these things, and there's no uniform understanding, at least on my part, as to what level we in fact subsidize. Don't like that word in this case. It is support, I think would be a better word. So one of the things I've asked the administration as they come back in the future with this stuff is that we understand why there is a level of subsidy or investment or looking after at a certain level, and why it isn't either more uniform or why it varies so much. I need to understand that. We'll be talking about that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions or comments? I have one to the administration. Just the notion of including corporate overhead in the pricing model. This has not been done before and is being suggested in the future. I'm wondering, this has been a long-standing issue, how we charge back, and I'm wondering why it hasn't happened and what's the impact going to be on those fees and charges relative to competitiveness with the private sector and how we provide support. Mr. Holden?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and it follows up to Councillor O'Donnell's statements, is in 2013 we're doing a cost recovery project within the Community Development, Recreation and Parks area. We'll be looking at all the costs associated with the delivery of programs and facilities and athletic fields, etc. And what we'll be doing is really taking a look at what is the role of the municipality and what level of subsidy, if any, should there be. Our fees have traditionally not included corporate overhead, which is roughly about 21% is the current calculation. So we'll be bringing reports forward in 2013 that clearly, as Councillor O'Donnell has indicated, will paint the picture of the true cost of providing facilities, what we believe subsidy rates should be in terms of the role of the municipality, and then, of course, there'll be decisions through committee and council.
Thank you for that. Other comments, questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move to report 12-185, appointment of pest control officers. Councillor Flagel.
And bylaw enforcement officers as well. Thank you. Ryan Morgan, Manager Forestry Horticultural. Wade Morrow, Supervisor Pest Management. Russell Irick, Supervisor Forestry, and Ryan Johnson, Pest Control Officer, have all been had their names put forward to be on the pest control and bylaw officers for 2013. Yes, to the end of 2013, and we recommend concurrence.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments by members of council? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Executive Committee to the 12-186. Councillor O'Donnell.
These are reserve changes to the Regina Administration bylaw. I'm going to give this briefly. The minimum maximum target balances for the asphalt reserve be set between $300,000 and $1.5 million. That the minimum and maximum target balance for the employee-provided parking reserve be between $400,000 and $6 million. The Regina Police Service General Reserve, that the minimum target balance of $400,000 and maximum target balance of $2 million be set. That the minimum target balance of $100,000 and a maximum target balance of $6 million be established for the Regina Police Service Radio Equipment Reserve. That no target balances should be established for the Social Development Reserve at this time, as this reserve fund does not clearly lend itself to the targeted balance requirement. That the minimum target balance of $400,000 and maximum target balance of $3 million be established for the Technology Reserve, and that the Asset Revitalization Reserve be amended so that under authority of the City Manager, any transfer of any surplus interest from the reserve be limited to not more than the surplus interest previously accumulated in the reserve. So you'll note, one, this is as a result of a review. Two, this is, you'll notice there's quite fluctuation. There are times when we need to build it up so that we purchase equipment. When things are new, then we have a little bit less in the balance. I'm going to introduce another phrase. It's called asset management. That's what we're talking here. We need these things. We look after them. We put money aside so that we don't have to debate these things on the floor of council. This is just a further review and a refinement of that process. Look for concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Any questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public Works Committee, proposed uniform rates, report 187. Who will take that one? Who is at Public Works? Somebody must have been at Public Works. Councillor Hinks.
I'll move it. I just wasn't ready for this, but this is just to concur the recommendation contained in the report, and it's the assessment rates for 2013 local improvement program.
These are the rates for all local improvements for sidewalks and streets, and it indicated in the report it's about a 10% increase over last year, uniform rate. These are what we'll be doing for 2013 construction year. Any comments or questions on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two quick questions. One, I'm just curious, the interest rate is set at 6.57. It explains that that's an average of posted primes over the past 5 years. We just don't use consistent interest rates. I guess the number we're using for borrowing for the stadium, the number we're using for borrowing for the water treatment plant, and the number we're charging citizens to borrow through us, in essence, is quite different, like 3% different. So I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I'm wondering if someone would comment to that. And then also, I'm wondering how back alley paving, I had a call from a citizen the other day about snow removal, and I'm just wondering if part of your added charge for having your back alley paved, if we clean the snow too. Thanks.
Mr. Wanjura.
Your Worship, Councillor Fraser is correct. We set our interest rate based on the average of prime rates. It's intended to reflect an equivalency if someone wanted to finance it themselves through a line of credit or home equity loan, something like that. So we try to maintain that competitiveness. On the rear alley levies, or pardon me, the paved alley levies, if I captured your question correctly, if a neighborhood wants to have their alley paved, they could do that, or they could request that. We would do it and charge it back to the abutting property owners. With respect to snow removal, snow removal in alleys is funded as part of our regular maintenance program. So if there's a spot that needs attention, I can certainly follow up on that.
Councillor Fraser, okay with that? Any other comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaws. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaws 2012-25, 75, 98, 99, and 100 be introduced and read first time.
Councillor Bryce, you want to just sort of name what they are, just let people know what the names of the bylaws are? Just
Sure. 2012-25 is the local improvement uniform rates. 12-74 is the community services fee amendments by law. 12-98 is the appointment and authorization of city officials. 99 is the 2012 local improvements uniform rates amendment. 100 is the Regina administration amendment by law. And 2012-101 isn't on my list.
okay. Moved by Councillor Bryce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thanks. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Fraser that bylaws 2012-25, 74, 98, 99, and 100 be read a second time. Do I need to add 101? No. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fundura, that Council hereby consents to hearing bylaws 2012-25, 74, 98, 99, and 100 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaws 2012-25, 74, 98, 99, and 100 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
Just, so what are we doing with 101? Is it on there by
It's
mistake?
been it was part of the motion. It was
Okay,
tabled.
yes.
That's correct.
Got it.
There's no other business, Councillor Fraser. It's adjournment. A motion to adjourn.
I'll
All those
second that.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. And this is the last council meeting until 2013. So on behalf of council, we want to wish those in the audience and in the gallery a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.